Cool. So let's get started. And all right, great. Can you tell me a bit about your like your relationship to games and play? Yeah, how did you like first get interested in like digital worlds? I understand The Sims was a part of your origin story.
Yes, very much. I was very into simulation, close to reality games growing up. I think I started playing. Um, I might even have learned how to read on some video games because I
Oh,
started
really?
playing really young, on small like online interactive game, and from just like online easy little game, I went to more immersive. And for several years, I was mostly playing on like driving games, whether it was like RPM tuning or Trackmania. I think I loved driving through cities and landscapes I've never been in, and I was super attracted to. Um, so for a long time, it was very much like driving game, racing games, and then The Sims.
Okay.
I
All
think I
right. Yeah.
started, yeah, being interested
Those are
in
yeah.
simulation gaming very
What
young,
did you
young on.
what did you do with The Sims? There's different ways to play The Sims. What kind of player were you?
Uh, I was actually, I sort of like hacked The Sims, and with my sister, we had add-ons that we would use that would make us like have enormous Sims, like like bigger than the walls, and we would like press this machine and have all the points of knowledge, and or just like do this other line of code, and all of the Sims are in love with each other in the room, and there's like five of them. So I was very into pushing the boundaries of the gameplay, but also I just like doing like celebrities, and I think I did my families and friends very much in like,
Okay.
fancy homes and fancy neighborhoods. That was also the use I had of it. But true, there's many different people. Sometimes they just do their life, and some people they do like fantasy. Or I
Yeah.
have a lot in my TikTok feed, people that put some Sims in jail in some bunkers that they create and like enslave them, or like stuff like that. So I know there's like many different lores of, approaching the game, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. The Sims is very interesting in that way because it both is in the lineage of pure simulation games like SimCity and things like that. But it is also highly imaginative, pulls from like a dollhouse lineage as well, like dollhouse and dress up and those types of things which had not been expressed in games. So it does allow for either of those ways to play. You can either be someone who's creating a version of your own life and imitating everything that you see around you, or something more aspirational or something you can never aspire to be. So it is a very flexible play space in that way. Um, let's see here. Okay, so were you making games as well, like at that age, or was it just that you were just playing games?
I was very much a user. I will be then on the like, computer interface. I will play a little bit with them like silly terminal things, and but I was not I had no idea we could make it. Actually, I think it took me some years to actually realize that it was possible to be behind the scenes of it. And I actually started making films. And I think my films were very much influenced by video game culture and online culture, such as I think of like This Is How the World Ends that I did in 2019 or 2020. And it was during the lockdown, so it was very much lockdown oriented in a VIP software that could offer services of having an online life to avoid lockdown regulations, and reach people who do it to avoid any. regulation, and it will pay extra to have, more gigabytes on this fictional software that was named Beyond Beyond.
Okay.
And actually, the whole part of the upload where there was like an example in the film where people were uploaded, and then I used The Sims and filmed in The Sims to play that part. So I think that was the first steps of using video games directly, whether it's the images themselves, whether it's as a narrative. So that was one of my first films actually, and yeah, 2020. This is how the world ends, and then I think it was also Always Present, as well as in Take Me to Your Dreams. That is another film I made about digital immortality. And I think that the way in general that I use the characters, I think that I direct them like avatars more than as a director that directs their um actors and actresses as, uh realistic people. I think that in my films they're more, yeah, avatars and characters, and I think that's a direct reference to video game, because they're not interactive, because it's a lot of my work, especially early on, is film pieces. But I think in the way that they go around the story, and they have this little bit of a NPC behavior that that is drawn directly from video games, I think. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does seem like you also draw these like very strong, like character types, like having as like the hacker or the tech executives or the influencer. Like they do have these very strong personas as well, as opposed to just being, in addition to being like digital versions. So you are kind of like drawing on a very specific, known entity in, online life as well.
yeah, yeah, true, true, true. Which I could not do. I could not have Mark Zuckerberg played stared in my films, right? But with the with this deep fake ish impersonation, then I can still this entities.
Yeah. Why do you feel like you gravitated towards film as opposed to making games? Because some people have that experience that you had playing games growing up, and that leads them immediately to making games, and you spent time developing another craft and another discipline before kind of like coming back to games and virtual worlds.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, uh, because yeah, the way I also think of, you know the writing, the scenarios. I can't write a proper scenario. It's very it's very non-linear, so it would actually fit most likely a video game better. But maybe because of my means, it was very very easy to just be able to tell a story from a computer generated film, grabbing found footage, this piece of dialogue, and then writing this one with the I think it was when I urgently wanted to create some works, then I had this very cheap and easy access to uh, a free editing software, and just sticking the pieces together like collage. And I think that I was able to tell my story enough this way, and maybe then I there's also a sense of uh, authority somehow, because then I get to tell what's the beginning, what's the end. And maybe I needed these years and years of films digestion to understand how people respond to a narrative, and then being able to add the option of interaction is a whole new dimension. So I think I needed this like years of of understanding the reception of the narrative, and being able to tell mine, to to add another layer of freedom in this narrative. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think
And
that's my answer.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's almost like you respect the process of interactivity so much that you wanted to make sure that you could do it right and be sure that you had something to say. It's interesting because yeah, some game makers, like for more systems, they like people who really focus on like the mechanical side of games, like the moment to moment interaction of players. That storytelling side never really like develops. They're really only interested in those moment to moment interactions and not any of the other things. So yeah, it's interesting to see how games are emerging from a full, cinematic or a narrative point of view that you'd
Ah,
already
true.
developed.
Yeah, because then the technique, I don't know it so much. Then it's a whole lore to have merged with the narrative side. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about that, I guess, since we continue with the Jan piece. One of the things I noticed with your work is that you keep returning to like this moment when the internet doesn't work. It's not a catastrophe exactly. It's not an apocalypse. It's like something a little more ambivalent. Yeah. Do you think of like for like internet collapse, like, do you think of that as being like, are you mourning something that's lost there? Or do you feel like you're just thinking about new possibilities in a post, when the internet finally cuts down?
Um, I think it's almost the majority of it is almost about more how it modified behaviors and society and almost on an anthropological level so quickly. So I think I'm interested in the human interaction of it and in the human habits of integrating this massive, you know, uh, omnipresent tool more than an actual fear of its disappearance because as long as two computers are connected, internet exists, right? So but I think it's more about it's about how I'm more interested in how, and then imagining is this disappearance helps taking a step back about how what we let internet become, and and it's about also the project of what it was and was what it aimed originally, and how it shifted also so quickly to very far from open source knowledgeful kind of like projects that was at the beginning. So I think it's a pretext to talk about internet itself. um I'm of course a part of it is an interest for you know uh geopolitical issues of and very like concrete, very pragmatic issues on how the internet exists and how it could not exist at the same time, and what it takes to maintain. And I think that tells a lot about about the design of the internet as well, like the lack of resources, I would say, to the general public about how internet actually works, in the internet of objects, and how their knowledge is stored and how the data is stored. And I think it's a many different fascinations and concerns about um its actual existence more than its disappearance that
Mhm.
is the topic of the internet collapse. But yeah, I think that the rapid change in behaviors and in the brain, and in the body, in the way you use the body because of the tools. I think it's what interests me the most. And also, yeah, a little bit the nostalgic grieving part of its evolution is also in some layers the topic of internet collapse.
Um, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting type of like apocalypse, like it just goes back to like, there was a world before the internet, it's that did exist. I grew up in a world where the internet was on the rise, like in the 90s, so I'm 44. So, I remember the moment where the internet became a more, I'm aware of the evolution of it. So it's a very strange kind of apocalypse, the idea that like maybe it might exist in the way it was when I was 10 or something like that, which isn't frankly all that long ago. In a way that's very different from like an apocalypse where there is no electricity or, there's no electricity, or there are no, just some of the industrial ways that we think about the apocalypse. So it is a very interesting idea to think about, just what if we're just not connected in the same way? It's not that long ago.
But from what you say, it also makes me think of this little game I like to play in my head, and that led to the internet collapse as well. That is this a little 50 years chapter that could end in a minute, and that would have been just a small tab in the history of humanity? Or was this 2000 years without internet just a little start, and then internet is on for like millions of years, and will transform what we think humanity is? So I think it's also about this dichotomy that as you growing up 40 years ago will have no idea that it even existed. So I think it's this little craziness that I like to play with.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, you've talked in the past about like nostalgia for Web 1.0. You were just talking about that, about kind of the dreams and the optimism for Web 1.0. I think the other part of it too is like the other part of it too is like the issue with like the social web is really more about just like habits and behaviors. I see that in some of your pieces. I think it's in Paid Detox. You kind of have these avatars that are still going through the memories of kind of like zombies. They're still reenacting, scrolling, and they're doing these actions even though they're not connected to the internet. And so I do think that that's the problem, right? It's like these new behaviors that were introduced and then reinforced. And yeah, maybe those are just habits that can be broken pretty quickly, but we can move forward with like the overall history of the internet in a different way. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Let's see here. Cool. Mark Zuckerberg is like a recurring figure in your work, is a recurring character in your work, and then Kim Kardashian in Paid Detox. Why those two people specifically? What was it about maybe the two of them that when they represent for you as an artist?
I think it wasn't meant to be that important in the beginning, and then empirically became main characters in my works. But then I think it almost became like a sing joke, because I could use Sam Altman would be a very interesting character, and I have not explored yet, but it will come. But I think it's because of their their own images that I'm also interested in them. Mark Zuckerberg also represent this early stages of Web 2.0 that seem to be more connecting and hopeful that it actually is now. So I think he's an easy to fit in character, because he feeds that very dystopian narrative of the internet shifting to a completely different political place that Mark is also a symbol of. Seeming very American dream, kind of like little genius nerd, self-made, but ends up being the MAGA billionaire supporter. So it
Yeah.
is very good material to talk about a political shift of online places as well. And I think the Kardashians they're very important. They're very important in the culture. They're from what people lurk on buying, looking like, communicating. The whole lore of social media culture is very much influenced by them, and not only since Kim Kardashian, but also since, as the way they use communication since OG Simpson, and the way they influence the culture as TV reality, and then they invented a way to present oneself with digital representation tools. And we've witnessed many stages of the Kardashian in the last, almost 30 years now. Um, so I think I use them as almost religious pillars. They're they're like they appear, and they appear as cultural influencers almost, that it's almost like I could do a documentary about a politician, but it would not be um as a it will not have so much as much impact as the Zuckerberg and the Kardashian have on people, right? Because it's unprecedented, the quantity of insights and engagement and interest is unprecedented in any form of culture. So I think it's this, and also with the Kardashians specifically, I think they did understand something about, yes, communication for sure, but um, I think they represent American culture as well, because in my understanding, in my perspective, I think that in the system that is the United States of America, people are not citizens; they're employees of a company, and then the federation is a company, and this family being a business, and having no boundaries between what's business and what's life, what's family, what's private, what's not. I think that they touched something about what about how we live under capitalism, and in that sense I think they're just an immense resource of contemporary human relationships, and um just contemporary culture in general beside internet.
Yeah. I mean, they're also very interesting characters for me. They represent these two sides of, celebrity or fame and commerce. In eras past, like the most famous person in the country would not necessarily be someone who runs like a Fortune 500 company. Like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. Like their fame is directly connected to how pervasive the products that they've built, the companies that
Mhm.
they've built. And that's pretty new. No, I guess in the United States we certainly had that, like with the robber barons, Rockefeller, Carnegie. But even so, they were not nearly as visible. They were not nearly as they were famous and not they were not visible in large part because people were very mad at them, and it was not like safe for them to be out in public. It was not they knew that they needed to be sort of protected from everyday people. And then with the Kardashians, it's kind of the opposite, right? Where like in the past, usually like fame would be sufficient. That was enough, like to be famous. But it's not enough to be famous. You need to become more like a Mark Zuckerberg. Like you need to build an empire, and you need to be selling things. And so they do sort of represent this interesting contemporary dynamics under capitalism between fame and commerce.
And
Yeah, they
also,
just kind
as
of
you
approach
say,
it the
they
same
they
way. Yeah,
created the fame. Oh, sorry.
yeah, yeah. No, go ahead.
They created fame before they created a product, which is a funny way
Right.
to go. They build the
Yeah,
image, and
yeah.
then they like, oh, we can make projects out of this image. And in their relationship, if I can add, I think that I use them as a system representation where tech companies, so let's say like San Francisco or Silicon Valley, creates like shells. They code shells, um, empty shells, and then the Kardashians, LA, create content, and then they go hand in hand to to you know uh waterboard the markets of their presence, and then it goes
Yeah,
hand in hand.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, looking at some of the game, one of the things that was interesting to me about your films is like the use of like gaming imagery or gaming shorthands. Like you use the GTA, that death sequence, the death sound that I don't know how to describe it. It's like whatever that sound is when you die. which I thought,
Oh
which I,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's like kind of reverby slow motion. In addition to, I see like things from, like, 3D assets that you've pulled. And yeah, I was curious about specifically, like, have you built like an inventory of that like gaming language? Like, I think you've used some of the Sims music. I heard like Wii music in one of your pieces of like, I was just curious about these, like, how do you pick these like elements to work into your video projects?
I have uh big library assets, um,
Okay.
and I spend a lot of time digging assets. Um, eh, I almost like scroll assets, and sometimes it's even assets that makes me want to do a scene. Uh, it's a little bit like in my early films where I would use found footages, and stock stuff and popular video found on social medias, and then taped together. So I have kept, even though I create all the decors and everything is you know made, I do keep this habit of extracting and collecting and piecing together. And yeah, K Detox, for example, because I think it's where there's the most like you know uh video game looking piece is completely made as a video game and filmed in it. So the interactions are just looped, and I just made the film out of the cinematics out of filming in the game. So if Prague, it could almost become a video game. Um, and you were more asking about the assets, library assets side of it.